Greta Thunberg, is she a martyr or a hyper-emotional teenager like most? Well, I'm going to go deeper on that on this week's Tuesday Trees Philosophies, right about now. All right, welcome to Tuesday's Trees Philosophies. This is where I go deep on various subjects that are of interest to me in pop culture. People always tell me I go too deep. Well, I go deeper, baby. Anyways, let's jump into the matter at hand. So what I'm going to play for you is a short clip from a longer podcast that I did where I really went in depth on the subject of the UN speech that Greta Thunberg gave. And we really dissected, myself and my friend, we dissected the whole optics of the situation and beyond just the words that were said, but what was the overall message that was sent to the world with the whole optics of having a teenager get on a global platform and yell at everyone, basically. So without further ado, let me play this clip and I'll go into it in further detail afterwards.
The fact that climate change has not been dealt with, it's a problem now in this generation. Young people know it's going to affect them in the future, and that they feel the need to gather and protest and show adults that this matters to them is kind of fucked up. That's what she's trying to say there. It's kind of fucked up that you adults, haven't taken care of this, and that we kids need to, quote unquote, push you guys to do this. What the hell? Most people don't expect kids, below whatever, 16, 15, 14, to have to, you can't vote, you can't drink, you aren't expected to take on a responsibility, especially the responsibility of being the main proponents for action on climate change. And so I think that's what she was speaking to. Like, isn't it crazy that a bunch of kids have to be here yelling at you to do something? What's going on here?
Okay, so I think Elliot brings a interesting point here, which is pretty much is saying that it's a bit messed up that we have to entrust a 16-year-old teenager in order to get our global leaders that we've entrusted in order to lead our countries to enact policies that will benefit in environmental sustainability, growth, whatever metric that you want to use is. And I think that's a valid point. It is a bit sad that we need to turn to a teenager, a 16-year-old, in order to be a leader for that movement. But my response would be, why are these politicians not taking the steps and the actions necessary that, again, people have entrusted them with in order to get their countries on track with regards to sustainable growth, environmental sustainability, green energy, whatever the metric is that you want to use, because again, this can be divided up into so many different ways of measurements and categorizations and growth, and what's the metric that we're using? Clean water, clean air, what is it, right? Anyways, that's a whole nother subject. But again, go back to my fundamental point is, why do these politicians need to rely on this 16-year-old to get their message across? And what that tells me is that they cannot get their message across via logic and convince the public through logical reasoning as to why certain policies need to get implemented, and thus, because they cannot convince people due to a rational basis, what they need to do is convince people via an emotional argument. If the rational argument isn't working, use an emotional argument, and that is the number one rule of marketing. You try to get emotional response from your ad. So to me, it almost became more of a marketing stunt. The optics of it were much more reminiscent of some sort of PR type of thing, which again calls into question the whole integrity of the situation. If we have entrusted these global leaders to take the steps in order to get our countries to hit these metrics, first of all, we need to define what these metrics are. whether that's with the Paris Accord, whatever it might be. But at the end of the day, we need to give countries the ability to make those decisions that are most important for themselves. You know, we can't necessarily always do this whole, all right, everybody agrees to one thing and then that's what we're doing. Like, it just doesn't work. We have countries with diverse populations, diverse cultures, diverse approaches to things. You can't expect country X is going to do the same thing as country Y when it comes to a certain problem. It's just unfeasible. So therefore, for all the countries to come together and say our one shining hope is Greta Thunberg to yell at you, it's like, man, then if that's your Hail Mary, like we're in some serious trouble. Because from my point of view, there are way better champions out there. No disrespect to Greta Thunberg, because I think what you have to do in order to put yourself on stage, you know, she's essentially putting action towards her philosophy, which I have to respect. I might not agree 100% with the way in which she's doing it, but you know what? She's hustling. I gotta respect the hustle. That's really as simple as that. You know, it's so easy for us to look at people that are being put up by the media and say they didn't deserve that, and they're actually like horrible, this and that. And, you know, even if you look at musicians like Drake, Justin Bieber, how many people love to hate on these musicians? You know, myself included sometimes, you know, in good jest, but whatever. But it's because naturally we have this affinity to see somebody that's at the top, and then we harp on them. We find things to dislike because maybe subconsciously part of us wishes that we would be in that position, and maybe it's jealousy, whatever it is. So again, when it comes to what Greta Thunberg is doing, I respect the hustle, but the means in which she's doing it and what she's doing, it's like that's where there's a bit of a divergence in terms of the approach. So from my perspective, we need to have these conversations. It's super essential. But when, again, our world leaders that are supposed to be governing through science, through data, right? That's what we're trying to do. We keep talking about data and science and how climate change should be driven by data and science. Well, you know what data and science is not? It's not emotional. It's very unemotional, actually. It is a very uninterested with crying children. Sorry to break it to you, but science is fundamentally not interested with those types of displays of emotion. It's based on data. Let's look at where the science leads us. Let's do X and Y and Z and see if it brings us the results that we thought it would. But when we're injecting science, and now when we're trying to have a conversation related to science, and then we're saying, hey, we're having this scientific discussion, which is based on logic and rationale and you know, good logical data-driven premises. Right? Logical conversation. And then you bring in this girl that's throwing a bunch of emotional rage, anger, then you expect people to listen to you. It's like, I thought the whole conversation was one of logic and rationale, and now you're bringing this emotion into it and somebody yelling at you, and that makes it very difficult to actually progress. That makes it difficult to actually have a solution that people can agree upon. When you lay out a playing field based on logic, and then on that playing field, you bring the most emotional person you could find. So I think there's better champions that could be used, that could have been used by the UN. For example, and this is what we go to in the podcast in greater detail, which I really encourage you to check out. I will leave a link in this video in the description below for the longer podcast, because I think it's a really fascinating discussion that will bring you some value and some different types of insight on those types of global events that are taking place. And so somebody that would be a better champion would be Boyan Slat, who is the young 20-year-old, 20-something, 22, 23, from Netherlands, and he has started a method of collecting the plastics, the microplastics that are essentially collecting within the oceans. So he's harvesting those plastics that are building up in the oceans, taking taking out those plastics and then trying to do something with them, trying to create something novelty, maybe a sunglass or whatever that people can purchase, and then help fund this initiative that is going to clean the plastics and then create some product that people can feel valuable to hold and represent, because they paid their money in order to support the project that is cleaning up the oceans. I mean, but maybe our world leaders don't want that because it's a capitalistic model, and what this girl is yelling at people to do is, oh, capitalism is foolish. Capitalism is based on this foolish notion of infinite growth. So, of course, our UN leaders choose to champion a girl that absolutely defecates on capitalism, as opposed to another young, smart entrepreneur that is actually taking action, not just yelling, but actually taking action via the capitalistic system to harvest the plastics out of the ocean and convert it into some sort of product and sell it through the capitalistic system. Now, to me, that's a much better story that is much more worthy of pushing out to people and using that person as your champion. We need Boyan Slat as our champion, not Greta Thunberg. Come on. If you agree with that, hit the like button right the hell now, so that people know we need Boyan Slat to be the UN champion for the youth, as opposed to Greta Thunberg. That's a fact. That's a fact. Anyways, let me leave you with that, because I want you guys to go watch the full podcast. First Principles podcast. We looked at Greta Thunberg, and let me know what you think. Let me know what you think about this video. What are your thoughts on Greta Thunberg in general? Do you vibe with her? Do you oppose her? Or, hey, do you appreciate her but still maybe disagree with her? That's okay too. It's okay to agree with some stuff and disagree with some other stuff. That's all right too. We're all in the middle a little bit. Anyways, that was this week's Tuesday's Trees Philosophies. Guys, please subscribe if you are into these types of deep concepts, deep discussions. I go deeper, and share these discussions with your friends, because we need people to talk about these important issues, and it just really comes down to having a conversation. It's really that simple. So share it, hit the subscribe, give a like, and I'll catch you guys next week. Tuesday's Philosophies, guys. Peace.